criticism from US President Donald Trump after he threatened to stop funding the agency over its handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Trump said he was looking into putting a hold on money sent to the WHO, accusing the UN agency of being very China centric. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus asked not to politicize this virus. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the role of the WHO. Joining me on the program today are Prabhu Dayal, former ambassador, Dr. Mekla Chandra, senior consultant, internal medicine, Sutter Medical Center, California, and Urmi Goswami, assistant editor of The Economic Times. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador, I'd like to begin the program with you. Let's first analyze and put into perspective what the role of the UN agency, the WHO, is.
The WHO is to monitor the world health situation and to prevent any outbreak such as that of COVID-19. Now, there is a lot of concern that the WHO has failed to live up to its responsibility. In particular, the role of the Director General of WHO, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, has come into question because it is being said that he has helped the Chinese to cover up rather than help the world in preventing the spread of the virus. Now we must understand who the Director General is. He is from Ethiopia. He belongs to the Communist Party of Ethiopia. He was health minister from 2005 to 2012. And then from 2012 to 2016, he was the foreign minister. And then in 2017, he was elected the director of the World Health Organization with a lot of support from the Chinese. Interestingly, he was selected as the only candidate from Africa, the sole candidate, at the African Union Summit, which was presided over by Mugabe, Robert Mugabe. And there were a lot of questions raised about this, but of course, it became clear that there have been some deals worked out, and later the Director General tried to make Mr. Mugabe the global ambassador for the WHO. Now, what has happened in the recent context of COVID-19 is that initially in November, there were reports about the outbreak of a new kind of virus. But these reports were suppressed by the Chinese. Then slowly it came to light that there was a serious situation. Dr. Li Wenliang was the Chinese doctor who was a whistleblower, and attention was to be drawn to the fact that there was this dangerous virus now which was spreading Wuhan. I would like to call it the Wuhan virus or the Chinese virus. Now, what did the WHO do? It tended to ignore these reports and it sided with the Chinese in trying to portray the situation as under Chinese control. Then, on 23rd of January, there was a meeting of the WHO where there was a move to declare it an international emergency. But the Director General refused to go along and he killed this initiative to declare it an international emergency. Finally, on 30th January, he was compelled to do so because the virus was really spreading globally. He still did not declare it a pandemic, preferring to say that this was something that was brought under control. When things went totally out of hand, he finally, on 11th March, declared it a global pandemic. Now, the point that I'm trying to make, and which has been made universal, is that he connived with the Chinese, he helped the Chinese to cover up, and he did not fulfill his responsibility of alerting the global community about this dangerous virus. And this is why we are faced with a situation where over 50 countries are confronted with this virus, and there have been 1.5 million cases, more than 85,000, something close to 90,000 deaths have occurred. So, in a nutshell, the WHO has failed to live up to its responsibilities, and the calls for its reform, made even by our Prime Minister Modi made a call for the reform of the WHO, and other global leaders have made such calls also. These calls are very justified. I would like to point out that this is
Right.
the first time that the Director General of the WHO is a politician. Earlier, it was always a doctor who headed the WHO, and this politician, I'm afraid to say, has got some deals earlier with the Chinese. So the Chinese have invested heavily in Ethiopia. There are reports of kickbacks. Whether these reports are true or not, the fact is that there is a very close relationship between the Chinese and the Ethiopian. And
Sure.
he was foreign minister, he was health minister earlier, he had been a part of
Points
close
noted. Let me
relationship.
take the points that you're
And
making,
when the
Ambassador.
crunch came, he sided more with the Chinese than with the global community. So I hope I made my point that the Chinese have used the WHO under its Director General to power up, and this has hurt the global community in a very big way.
Okay. All
That
right.
is
Let me take the points that you're making forward as well. Urmi Goswami, from the WHO's point of view, let's not forget that the budget is about 2.5 billion US dollars. And from that perspective, and dealing with a pandemic like the coronavirus and what we've seen so far, of course, is the WHO equipped enough to handle a situation like this?
Well, the COVID-19 pandemic is unprecedented. The last time you had such a global pandemic was 100 years back with the Spanish flu, and you didn't have the WHO at that point. So clearly, this is much bigger and than than anything the WHO has handled in the past. Now, the question really is that what is the WHO there for? It is basically a multilateral body, a UN agency, which is charged with global health. And they have performed well in global situations in the past, whether it's SARS or MERS, or even, when it comes to dealing with polio. Now, part of the problem is that over the years, we have seen that we had many countries sort of recede from their responsibility as of a global community. I mean, a multilateral body such as the UN or a UN agency works. Basically, it's an honest. You are part of the global community. You do your bit. So whether it's about giving budgets, whether it's about upping the budget or providing money or ensuring, like in the WHO's case, you also have the system of budgets which are from government budgets, but which are country contributions, but also private contributions. Now, what has happened in the recent years is from China, though its country contribution is not that great, they have mobilized private contributions. Now, it suddenly it seems that they have a little more influence in the system, and I think that's where where the world needs to wake up and realize that if you want a multilateral system to work, then you have to make it work. Each country needs to put their bit in, whether as governments or getting private contributions in the case of WHO. So that's one part of it. Any amount of budget, as we can see in this case, would not be enough. This is a pandemic. This is a crisis such as that we haven't seen in 100 years.
Absolutely.
So that is part of the problem. The other part of the thing is, yes, there are indications that that the Chinese sort of got away with suppressing facts. The facts seem to add up in that direction. Now the question is, at this point of time, we can spend time sort of focusing on what the Chinese did or not do, or let's see how the system can move forward. And I think in that sense, we had an early indication of where we as a country were looking to. If you remember Prime Minister Modi's address in the virtual G20 meeting, where he talks about strengthening the WHO to actually serve its goal. And I think that's where we need to go back to. to look at ways
Absolutely.
in the multi body can be strengthened and not go by any one or a. So I
Sure.
think that's spirit.
Sure. Okay. Mikla Chandra, let me bring you into the picture now. As a doctor, working in the United States, what is the kind of information that the WHO has been forthcoming with as far as the medical fraternity is concerned? How have they helped really with the situation?
So, as everyone mentioned, that WHO is a part of United Nations, and it has been involved in a lot of research and development in epidemiology of this COVID and obviously other diseases in the past. We hear more about WHO given the current scenarios. They definitely have been helpful. They have been accessing a lot of data from all over the countries. Getting all the publications together, getting all the reports and the evidences that everyone has put together. Of course, this is an ongoing process and a lot of information is incoming. And so, the guidelines have been changing, but WHO as being the standard body in the entire world right now, because I would like to say it's not politically influenced, has been providing us with a lot of guidelines in terms of patient care for health workers, in terms of population in general, and travel guidelines, in terms of universal masking. So simple things like that have been helpful. It's just because the situation is so chaotic right now, it's been able to provide some structure. So I would definitely, rely on WHO guidelines. As doctors, we are always reading about it. We do also have a CDC, which is Central of Disease Control for United States. So we read those guidelines too. Um, and so it's kind of like a mix of what you want to implement. Unfortunately, in the United States, the situation is a little chaotic because there is no one regulation going on. A lot of difference between the state governments and what the federal government is recommending. And so each state is implementing their own, lockdown guidelines, and everyone is having a lot of chaotic situation here.
Oh,
But coming to the hospital settings, we are following those guidelines. Unfortunately, we are still very limited on our PPEs, on our rapid test kits. So being the frontline workers, we're not really being supported as much as we would like to be during this pandemic. I'm sure the situation is different in different countries, but overall, what I hear is that the healthcare workers are suffering a lot because of lack of resources. And so we are hoping that WHO and other organizations can step in and provide those resources when we need it the most, because the healthcare workers are there in the front line along with other forces.
okay. All right. Taking the discussion forward now, I'm going to ask my panelists to be brief because we spent quite a bit of time in our opening remarks. Ambassador, somehow President Trump and multilateral organizations don't go hand in hand. This is not the first time where we've seen President Trump, go after a UN body or a body such as the WHO.
Well, it is true that President Trump does not really care for some of the international organizations, and he has his own way of going about it. But look, in the present situation, the WHO has not acquitted itself well. One of the panelists very correctly said that there is a need to strengthen the WHO, and that the Prime Minister has also made a call for it. Because the WHO has not shown transparency. It had the information, or it should have had the information, but then it failed to share that information in a timely manner with other governments. And by the time it spread the word that there was a pandemic, it was far too late because Chinese nationals had been flying all over the world. People from all over the world had been visiting China. And the virus had been spreading. Now, it could have been checked earlier if the WHO had shared information with governments, if it had shown transparency, and if there is anger about it, I think that anger is very justified. So I agree. the strengthening of the WHO, as our Prime Minister has himself pointed out, the reforms of the WHO are very important. And to my mind, the WHO should work free from political considerations. The Director General of the WHO should be a doctor, should be a medical professional, as has been as has been the case in the past.
Right.
To have a politician bringing in a lot of baggage and now heading the WHO is not a satisfactory situation. So I echo the call for the reforms of the WHO. As indeed, I say that the entire UN system should be reformed.
Okay.
And as far as this particular crisis is concerned, it should be a wake-up call to everybody.
Okay. All right. So, Urmi, so how do we improve the system? Let's look at the bigger picture now and let's look forward as well. So what needs to be done if we have to improve the system, and where do we start?
You know, one good template could be the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So unlike the WHO, it is not a permanent body. But we can take some of the systems that the IPCC has. One, it kind of gets what does the IPCC do? It gets scientists and experts from across disciplines together to work together. In the case of WHO, you have a core team, which is a permanent team, but you should have the ability to get doctors, epidemiologists, public health experts together. So in that sense, you borrow from the IPCC model. The other part is, of course, transparency. Now, one of the key problems that we have had here, and part of the sort of issues being raised, is that the WHO did not sound the warning. As a matter of fact, even as early as February 3rd, if you remember that India stopped flights from China by February 4th or 5th, and the US had done it around the same time. But on February 3rd, you have the WHO General say there is no need for widespread travel ban. It turned out finally that was the way to go. So, but I'm not trying to say that he was responsible for giving wrong information. The WHO depends on member states to give information. It's an honor system. Now, if countries themselves mislead, then there is a bit of a problem. So then what do you need? You need greater transparency. You need what is called your own ability to cross-check information. That means to have multiple, and that comes if you have, experts who you can reach out to as well. So that, and the most important thing is that you need countries to step up with their contributions, not to withdraw. President Trump's statement yesterday, which may or well not be reversed soon after, that they will stop all their contribution to the WHO, is not the way to go. Actually, it's the other way around. You need to step up. And every country needs to put in their money, but also then hold and participate in ensuring that the system works. You can't sit back,
Sure.
Because then you'll have somebody who steps in and takes over. So yes, were mistakes made. Yes, there were mistakes made. The question is whether they were intentionally made, or is it because the system did not have it in it to rectify. It depended too much on country information and therefore went with it. So I think that kind of a systemic cross-checking sort of assessment has to be done. I think, like with everything else, I don't think the world was prepared already. Though, if you look at scientific studies, you'll realize that you have all kinds of warnings coming, saying the next pandemic could be out of here. It's just that nobody took the next pandemic as something that is serious, and that again is a bit of a problem.
Sure.
You need the body to actually accept. Acknowledge that this may not, now it's no longer a once in 100-year event. It could well be something else. It may not be so big, it may be localized, and you need to be prepared for that. So those are the 4 items I would look at.
Okay, all right. So, Meghla Chandra, as a medical practitioner, what is it that you look forward to, or you look to when you look at organizations like the WHO? What more can organizations like the WHO do to help a medical practitioner such as you out?
See, the WHO is supposed to process all the medical information from all over the world. Reports. All our COVID positive patients are reported through indirect measures to the WHO. So they're supposed to compile all of these data lists and provide a useful outcome out of it, which unfortunately at this stage is not happening. What is happening is, as Ms. Urmi mentioned, that the alarm was sounded, and then when people heard it, there was a huge gap, at least in the United States. People started reporting cases since January, December, and the president did not act on it until March, and it was already too late. So who suffered from it are the patients, the healthcare workers, the common man, out of all the politics and all the economic crisis that's been going on. And so what WHO needs to do is definitely, there's a lot of funding going on in the R&D. We definitely need a vaccine. Otherwise, this pandemic is very far away from being ended. And so WHO just needs to provide us more information. And as I agree with with Ms. Urmi, that United States need to step up and provide more funding at this point. We need to come all together, be one world in this kind of situation, and bring more resources into what actually is happening rather than blaming each other, and provide more resources for the doctors, for the patients. Situation here pretty bad. We work in the front line. I've seen the ICUs. We're very limited on ventilators, very limited on medications, very limited on PPEs. We definitely need more resources in terms of that. And I would really comment on the way that India has been doing and dealing with this virus so far, with the lockdown nationally. I think they're taking some steps in advance, which United States failed to take previously.
Okay. All right. So let's get closing comments in now from all my panelists. Quick closing comments on the best way forward, starting first with you, Ambassador.
But firstly, the WHO has not been able to perform the responsibilities which it had been given. Secondly, there needs to be an investigation into this entire matter, but the Chinese have been blocking it. They prevented the UN from looking into this issue. Thirdly, funding to the WHO is required. There is no denying the fact, but at the same time, there has to be transparency in the functioning of the WHO. The WHO cannot allow itself to be manipulated by any country such as China to cover up a pandemic, because it is clear that the Director General of the WHO kept saying till the very end the Chinese were doing everything possible to control the spread, whereas it was not actually the case. And now we are confronted by a situation which we have seen since the Spanish flu. And there is a realization that the reform of the WHO is very, very important. And this is what our Prime Minister has also pointed out.
Right. Okay, Urmi?
We shouldn't use this occasion and the failings of the WHO, such as they have been, or to sort of put an end to this multilateral body. It is the time to strengthen multilateralism, because one thing that comes through is that it is impossible for any one country or a set of countries to come together to resolve this issue. It's actually the world that needs to come together, and that is what we must make that possible. Having said that, there is reform required within the WHO, and the reforms should promote transparency, should promote better information flow, should ensure that they get experts who are beyond the government system to also contribute. So there has to be a constant process of churning of information that comes, which the WHO assesses and puts out in a timely manner. Finally, governments need to realize that a system is only as strong as they make it. A multilateral agency, it's something that the Director General said in his defense, is that the WHO has only that much power over governments. If you look at the way this COVID-19 crisis has been undertaken, even when the WHO said that travel ban is not necessary or it actually does not help, the Indian government went ahead and did it because it had made an assessment of its situation and realized that it was the best course for it. It's
Sure.
unfortunate that many other governments were unable to pick up on a few because they looked at it very differently. So therefore, better information is required, better sharing of information among countries is required so that there is better learning. And I think the WHO plays an important role, and there is no reason to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We do
Okay.
need to reform it, and that's what we need to focus on.
Absolutely. And Meghla Chandra, please close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
I agree with all the remarks above. I think there should be a more fluid exchange of information, medically, legally, everywhere else. And then one thing we should learn from this pandemic is that what happens if there's a next crisis coming in. We should have learned better from the SARS and pandemic when it happened. With US, there were lack of all the national stocks of PPEs, and they never repleted it. So this was an example of not being prepared well. So from all of this chaos, we should definitely learn to be prepared next time more. And I think I agree with like each country has to do its own guidelines because the population is very different for each country and the density is different. But we should come together as one world during this crisis.
Absolutely. We should come together as one world. Humanity needs to prevail at the end of the day. And of course, there are reforms that are required as far as the UN is concerned, as far as body